In this video, I'm going to change the oil and a filter that's super common to the Toyota, Lexus, and Scion vehicles, and then I'm going to spend a couple of minutes giving some pointers and answering some questions that are very common. The vehicle we're going to demonstrate on today is a 2013 Prius V or Prius wagon. And a few things you're going to need. Of course, you can use a 0.30 weight for warmer climates. On the oil filler cap, Toyota recommends a 0.20, which is what we use today. This is a filter wrench made specifically for the car. You could use one like this because it's got the flats, but it may stick or it may not be enough. You want these cutouts to fit around the ears on the filter housing. And of course, you'll need a new drain plug gasket. That's what this is. And of course, the new filter. And this is the part for this vehicle. And also, you've got the clips that hold the oil access hatch. And to open those, you just flip the top up and pull them out. There's 3 of them. And a 3/8 inch ratchet fits right into the end of the filter wrench, which in most cases should be just fine. And then of course you'll need the 14mm socket for your drain plug. Now, if the filter's been over tightened, which is more common than we'd like, you may need a breaker bar. And instead of going into the 3/8 inch drive, you want to put a socket over the lug of the filter wrench. And the reason is, if they're over torqued, sometimes the 3/8 drive will actually split the filter wrench in half, and you don't want to do that. So you want to use a breaker bar, and if that's not enough, you can put an impact wrench on there, and I can show you in another video that I was able to get away with it with a standard 12-point socket. It actually did work, and it loosened the filter. But if you're going to use impact, you really should use an impact grade socket like this one. Okay, and you'll notice right away that it's got 6 surfaces in there. They call it a 6-point socket versus a 12-point. It is a bit stronger, and the reason so many of these oil filters are stuck on the vehicles is because shops use the impact guns to install them, and that immediately puts the torque at a couple hundred foot-pounds, which you don't want to do. Now, how do you know that the vehicle needs the oil changed? Well, in this case, what it does is every 4,500 miles, the Priuses anyway, they give you a flashing maintenance light. And if you don't do anything about it, at 5,000 miles, it will become a solid light. So I usually change the oil and filter at 4,500 miles on these vehicles. Put the car in the air, get your jack stands safely located, and pull those clips off so we can access the oil drain plug and the oil filter. And what I like to do, you pull those 3 clips off, I use a bungee cord. And I just go ahead and clip it on there. And to hold the hatch open, I just clip the bungee to the front grille of the car. And what's this? Oh, we have a little metal spring arm here. It is not a lock clip. It's not a lock pin. You should not remove it or modify it. Toyota does not want you to remove it, but they do want you to use the correct filter wrench. And when you do, and it hasn't been over tightened, you can put your 3/8 ratchet on there. And notice the spring arm, it goes right over the ears of the filter housing. It interferes with nothing. And it's actually there as a safety measure. So if you forget to tighten your oil filter, it'll keep it from spinning off and draining all your oil out. So it doesn't interfere with anything. Don't remove it. You do need to remove the drain plug. And we're going to use our 14mm socket to do that. And if you're not comfortable doing a crush washer by hand, you can use a torque wrench for this. The setting for this vehicle is 28 foot-pounds. And then we're going to go ahead and take a look at this filter. We've already loosened. Remember, we've loosened it about a full turn, and you notice no oils come out, and we're going to loosen it another full turn. And you'll notice there's still no oil coming out. And why is that? Because the only seal that this filter housing design has is the O-ring. Now you can see we've got oil coming out, which means that the O-ring has emerged. It's no longer compressed. And that also means we can finish the job by hand because we don't have the resistance of the O-ring. And when we remove it, we can go ahead and put it in our oil pan. This is actually a pretty healthy filter. And I can tell this filter was probably replaced at the last oil change, so it doesn't look too old or worn out. And if we look at the new filter box, it's got a little bit of instruction on there for where to correctly put the O-ring. And I guess NG is the international symbol for no bueno. Anyway, the filters always come with a new O-ring as well. Now, a lot of people dig these out with screwdrivers, and you don't want to do that. It's better to just pinch it forward from the sides like this. You can grab it by hand and pull it over. Otherwise, if you use a sharp tool or a screwdriver, you might damage the seal that it comes up against. The channel on the filter housing has to be smooth. If you go in there with a screwdriver and damage this channel, and lose your seal, you have to replace the whole housing. Now with the filter on, you can still easily get the new O-ring on, just like this. And what I do once it's in place is I just put a little fresh oil on my finger and I just coat it nicely, compress easily when we screw it back on. And the spring arm is still there. It won't interfere with installation, so you don't want to remove that. And then while I'm screwing it down by hand, you notice it only goes so far, and as soon as that O-ring contacts, it gets a little bit more difficult. And so to finish, we're going to go ahead and use the filter wrench. I'm going to put the 3/8 inch socket on there. And you'll notice that as I continue tightening it, I can still put my finger underneath the filter housing. We're nowhere near tightened, but right now, O-ring is embedded, it's compressed. So this is all the seal we're ever going to get. Technically, we could walk away now and that little spring arm would keep things from coming apart. But we're going to keep tightening it down until the filter housing contacts, and then we'll tighten it a little bit more. That's it, we're done. We're not going to put any kind of torque wrench on here. You can if you want. I'll put a torque setting up for that as well if you want to put a torque wrench on it. And we'll put our clips back in, close the oil hatch. We'll bring the vehicle off of the jack stand so it's level, and we now have a dry engine. We also have a dry filter housing, which means we're not going to get an accurate dipstick reading. There's our recommended oil, 0.20. We won't get an accurate dipstick reading until we have filled the filter housing and the oil pump with oil. So what we're going to do is we're going to just start with 3 quarts. That's not the full capacity, but it's more than enough to reach the oil pump and allow it to fill the filter housing and a lot of the jackets in the engine that have drained dry if we rev the engine. Now, how do we do that? Well, on a Prius, it's a little different, but it's simple. Just turn the car on like you normally would, but leave it in park. And when you do that, you can go ahead and push your gas pedal to the floor, and the engine will rev up. And again, you're in park, you're not going to go anywhere, but what that's going to do is it's going to allow the oil pump to pull fresh oil into that filter housing, into the pump itself, and maybe fill some of the jackets in the engine. So this way we will get a more accurate dipstick reading. So now you can shut the car off, you go back under the hood, and when we pull the dipstick out, it's not even touching, because of course we're low on oil, we need to add more oil. And you want to do this in stages. You don't want to overfill the car. So I'm going to pour some in, and once I do that, I'm going to pull the dipstick out and see if it's touching and where it's at. And I can see that it's touching, but it's definitely going to need more oil. So we're not done yet. And it might be hard to read the dipstick with fresh oil. And if you think it's hard on a Prius, let me just give you a quick side note. This is the dipstick from a Mini Cooper S, and it is probably the hardest dipstick on planet Earth to read. And this is with dirty oil, you can't see the level. A nice trick that I can show you is I've wiped it off. I'm going to go ahead and dip it in this fresh oil. And of course, when I pull it out, it's even harder to read because the oil's clear and you can't see anything on there. So just lay it on a clean towel like this. I've got a paper towel, and roll it aside. And what that's going to do is it's going to give you a very accurate reading for how high the oil came up on the dipstick, and it's easier to see that way. So anyway, back to the Prius. So now we poured more oil in, pulled the dipstick out. In this case, I can see it pretty well with the naked eye. I don't have to use any tricks. And it looks like it's right where we want it. So we're going to close up shop here under the hood and put the oil cap back on, of course. And now we need to tell the car that we changed the oil. And on this Prius, just use the display and the trip buttons on the steering wheel to put the car into trip A mode and then shut the vehicle off. Then with your feet off the pedals, press and hold the kilometer button, and while holding it, press the power button once, and then you press the power button a second time, and you'll see the maintenance light flash and go out, and then you'll hear 5 beeps, and that tells you that you successfully reset the maintenance. And you're almost done. Now you can just give a thumbs up and subscribe for future videos, and to help out anybody else trying to do this, please do share this video. Thanks for watching.